So much for joining tonight's presentation. I'm really excited to spend some time with you. Today's Next Steps for New Students presentation is on financial planning. Before we get into that, I just want to do a quick introduction. So my name is Desiree Morso-Tepaway-Kishik, and I work for the University of Manitoba as lead for the Indigenous Student Recruitment Team. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that the University of Manitoba is initiating a phased reopening, beginning with the fall 2021 term in alignment with public health guidelines. We are planning for an increase of in-person instruction for classes of up to 20 students, with the continued need for remote delivery of large classes. When registration does open up in July, it will be outlined in Aurora. So please continue to check your emails regularly and detailed updates in the coming weeks and months. So we'll get started into the presentation, but just before that, I just wanted to let you know that all of your microphones are muted and obviously your cameras are turned off. The Q&A function is available in case you have questions throughout the presentation. I do have one of my colleagues on the back end that can assist with answering those questions. The chat function is disabled. However, my colleague will be putting in some links in the chat that will be very helpful for you. We encourage you to wait to the end of the presentation because we will be doing a Q&A at that point too, where I can answer live questions. But if you have if you have questions that can't wait till the end, that's totally okay. Please just put them into the Q&A function and then we'll get started with them at the end of the presentation. So before we get started, I wanted to do a little bit of a timeline as to what we'll be discussing today. So we're going to start off by talking about where do you begin? And I know that this can be very overwhelming for some students, really understanding financial planning and where to go, where to get the information and how to get started. So we're going to start about there. And then we're going to delve into scholarships and bursaries and student loans and sponsorship. Then we're going to end off this presentation with some tips for success to really ensure that you have everything that you need to know to plan academically for, plan financially for your academics. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so where do you begin? I know how overwhelming it can be and how nerve-wracking it can be to really understand your finances and to understand, how to pay for your tuition, and not only your tuition, but other things that may come up while you're pursuing post-secondary. So the cost of education is more than just tuition and books. We really encourage students to estimate your living costs and create an education budget for yourself. It is very important to understand that your education budget is going to be very different than, say, your best friend or your cousin or a family member that's also attending post-secondary. Please try your best not to compare yourself to other folks because your circumstances are going to be different than others. Things that you'll need to take into consideration are things like rent, damage deposit, housing, utilities, family expenses, those types of things. Are you going to be living on your own? Are you going to be living with loved ones or friends? Are you going to have roommates? Are you going to live on campus, off campus, close to campus? Those are the types of things that you need to start thinking about. When I graduated from high school, I actually moved out on my own. So I moved out quite young and I had to think about how I was going to pay for my tuition as well as pay for my monthly expenses of living on my own. It's definitely doable as long as you plan and you make that education budget. Please don't be discouraged by the high cost of education, especially if your chosen career is in demand. Make that investment. And what I mean by that is invest in yourself. You are important, your future is important, and the best way to give yourself as many opportunities as possible is to invest in yourself. I definitely have to say that pursuing post-secondary was one of the best decisions I made for myself. So many opportunities came from that, and I probably wouldn't be in the position that I am today to have the things that I want without pursuing post-secondary. So let's talk a little bit about estimated tuition cost. As you can see here on this slide, in one column is the estimated cost for Canadian permanent resident student, and then the other column is the estimated cost for an international student. This is based on a University One student, so a student that has been admitted to the University One program. This estimated tuition is also based on full course load, so 30 credit hours per year, which would equal out to about 5 courses per term. That's the maximum amount of courses that you can take. So you pay per course, not per term. So obviously for someone that's taking 3 to 4 classes per term, their tuition will be less than, say, someone that's taking 5 classes per term. Things that you'll also need to take into consideration is textbooks and supplies, health and dental, sport and recreation, UPass. So this is estimated tuition. So my colleague would have put in the chat a link to the Financial Aid and Awards website at the U of M to be able to look at some other estimated tuition costs for specific programs. So you can go ahead and take a peek there if you're wanting to look at different types of programs. So let's talk a little bit about your options. Most students do pay for their post-secondary education with a combination of funds from several different sources. So this isn't anything new, and it's something that I want students to be aware of, because I do find that some students think, for example, if they take out a government student loan, that means they can't apply for scholarships and bursaries. Or if they're working, that means they can't apply for government student loan. And that's definitely not the case. So I want to let you know that I am a prime example of this. I actually utilized all of these. When I was in my first year, I did band sponsorship. My second, third, and fourth year, I was doing I took out a government student loan to help. I was working at the same time, and I was still applying for scholarships and bursaries. So please note that you can do all of it or one of it. So don't limit yourself when it comes to looking for different ways to help supplement and pay for your post-secondary education. So let's talk a little bit about scholarships and bursaries. So scholarships are monetary awards, and they're based on merits. So your merit could be, for example, your academic merit, how well you do in your classes, the types of grades that you get, your community service, how you give back to your community, extracurricular activities that you're involved with, like leadership, or maybe even your athleticism and how well you do in sports. Those are based on your merit, okay? And they're often gifted by various organizations or people. Eligibility requirements do vary per scholarship. For University of Manitoba scholarships, you must be enrolled in a minimum of 24 credit hours, which would equal out to 4 classes per term. Okay, so that's the minimum that you need to be in order to maintain that scholarship. Scholarships do not require repayment. So at the University of Manitoba, we do have a general entrance scholarships. So for those of you that applied before that March 1st deadline, you would be eligible for an entrance scholarship. Pardon me, the entrance scholarship is meant for direct entry students, so students applying directly from high school, or students that maybe have taken a couple gap years and do not have any prior post-secondary experience from another institution. So in order to be eligible for an entrance scholarship, you would be aware that you have to have a minimum of 5 courses from a pre-approved list, which can be found on the Financial Aid and Awards website. It's broken up into tiers, so level 1, level 2, and level 3. You will receive your scholarship offer if eligible, if available, after you've received your offer of admission. Please do not panic if you have not yet received your offer of admission. Still, things are going, and the admissions office is working as fast as they can to get through those applications. And again, you must have applied before that March 1st deadline. If you miss that March 1st deadline of submitting your application, unfortunately, you would not be eligible to receive one of these entrance scholarships based on your grade 12 marks. So there are different other kind of scholarships. There's internal scholarships as well as external scholarships. So internal scholarships mean that they are internal to our institution. So University of Manitoba specific. The University of Manitoba has an awards database. It's fantastic. You can use this database to search through all the different awards that the University of Manitoba offers. One thing to note is that there sometimes are specific scholarships depending on the faculty or the program that you have applied into. So for example, Asper School of Business has many specific scholarships meant for their students studying within their faculty, within their program. But there's also tons of scholarships that the University of Manitoba offers that are not based on the program that you're studying in, which means any student from any faculty can apply for them. So that's great. Another great way to look for scholarships is external scholarships. So external scholarships are scholarships that any student from any post-secondary institution can apply for. Google is your best friend. That's the best way to be able to search for these external awards. Just some off the top of my head, TD, City of Winnipeg has one, RBC, Asper Foundation has them. So a bunch of different organizations or businesses, not-for-profit, do offer scholarships. The thing is that you have to put in the time and you've got to research them. One thing that I always tell students is, take the time to put aside 1 to 2 hours per month to do your research. where you pull out your computer and you just start Googling and you start researching different types of scholarships that are available. This is going to keep you organized, because scholarships, there's no specific deadline as to when they stop offering them or when the deadline is. So that's why it's really important to just get in the habit of searching every month for upcoming awards. Sometimes students ask me, how do I search for scholarships if I'm using Google? So you can make your search as generic or as specific as you want. So say, for example, you were making it generic. You would just put in scholarships and bursaries in the province of Manitoba. And then a list would populate, maybe scholarship sites would populate, and you could search through them and start spending some time looking. Or you can make them very specific. So for example, when I was in university, one of the specific ways that I would type into Google is scholarships and bursaries in the province of Manitoba for Indigenous women under the age of 30, because that's how I self-identified, and it allowed me to be able to search through some scholarships that were meant for me, specifically for me. So that's another great way. So you can make them as specific or as general as you want. So bursaries are based on financial documented need and the ability to continue studies. Bursaries, again, do not have to be repaid, just like scholarships. University of Manitoba bursaries do require a minimum 2.0 GPA. Your GPA is your grade point average. So you would want to aim for about a C+ in order to be eligible to apply for bursaries. And you need to have a full-time enrollment of what's 18 credit hours. So that's 3 courses per term. Those are the requirements if you want to be eligible to apply for U of M specific bursaries. External bursaries may have different requirements. One thing to note is that bursaries typically are meant for folks that need some extra support, that could need some extra help, that maybe have some barriers. So maybe that could be, you have dependents, or you come from a single family income household, or maybe you live on your own and you're working, you don't make as much money. That's not to say that folks that come from a dual income household or that are getting assistance from their parents, living at home rent free, that doesn't mean you can't apply for bursaries. It just means that your chances of receiving them might be a little bit more slim in comparison to somebody that has a lot more barriers and that meets, that threshold that doesn't cut off at an income level. But don't take yourself out of the running, still apply for those bursaries, because it is based on your documented financial need. The average value of bursaries range in amounts from $100 to $1,000, with over 800 awarded annually. So the University of Manitoba also has a general bursary. All bursaries do require a budget section for you to be completed. The deadline is October the 1st and applications open in August. So once you've been admitted, once you've accepted your offer to the University of Manitoba, you would log into the Aurora system, which is the system you'll get very familiar with. And that's where you'll actually be able to fill out the application for the bursary. And again, it opens in August, so you still have tons of time to be able to apply for this bursary. International students can apply once they are in their second year of study. So let's talk a little bit about student loans and sponsorship. So loans, they are a monetary amount of funds that must be repaid with a rate of interest. Okay? Government student loans are usually funded by the provincial government. They get some money from the provincial government and then some from the federal government. And then loans via your financial institution, we do encourage you to inquire directly. So for example, if you're with CIBC, TD, RBC, or Assiniboine Credit Union, you would want to reach out and make an appointment with them to inquire to see if they offer student line of credits or student loans, and to see what the eligibility or requirements are and what their interests are. So that's up to you to, take a peek to see if that is something that would suit you. The only thing, the difference is usually about going through a financial institution is typically you do have to make payments even though you're in school. So that's just something to think about. Do you have the income to be able to make small payments? But make sure that you inquire directly with your financial institution if that's a route that you want to go. When it comes to Manitoba Student Aid, it's an online application. It's available in June for any Canadian or permanent resident students. Unfortunately, international students are unable to apply for Manitoba Student Aid, so you still have tons of time to submit an application. It does go live in June. So you register for both terms to qualify for a government loan. You must be a full-time student with at least 9 credit hours in each term, so 18 credit hours total, which equals out to about 3 classes per term, okay? There's no interest and no payment while in school, which is fantastic. That's something that really alleviated some stress for me when I chose to take out a Manitoba student aid and to apply for a government student loan. I love the fact that I didn't have to worry about any interest occurring while I was in school, and I didn't have to make any payments. The cool thing is too, is that, for example, I did a 4-year degree, but it actually took me 6 years to complete my degree because I wasn't taking a full course load. I was taking about 3 to 4 classes per term, which enabled me to be able to work at the same time, which is something that I needed. And even though it took me 6 years to do my degree, I didn't have to make any payments throughout those 6 years, which was a huge stress reliever. One thing to note though is that repayment begins 6 months after your last date of enrollment. So this is important to note. So say, for example, you're halfway through your degree and something comes up or you need to take a break from school, that's totally okay. The only thing is though, is that 6 months after your last date of you've taken classes, Manitoba Student Aid will require you to start making repayments. So it's important that you reach out to them to set up a payment plan or set up an alternate agreement or whatever it is. So it's important that you communicate with them and to read that fine print. So let's talk a little bit about sponsorship. So financial sponsorship for eligible Indigenous students may be available and may cover tuition, fees, mandatory books, supplies, and allowance. So if you are a self-identifying First Nations treaty status student, you can apply to receive post-secondary education sponsorship through your community. Financial assistance to alleviate the above listed costs as well as travel costs may be available to you. Now, every community is very different, so they have a different deadline, different application process. So it is important, and we do advise students to contact their education authority, band, or tribal council from their community to ask for an application and to figure out when the deadline is. So for folks that do live on reserve in community or maybe have a connection to their community and they know who to go to for an application, they know who to ask, fantastic, that's really great. But sometimes there's First Nation students that maybe live off reserve that are urban Indigenous students, and maybe you don't have, as solid of a connection to your home community. That's totally okay. The Indigenous student recruitment team would love to help you. So please reach out to us. I'm gonna have my colleague put in the chat our email address, which is indigenous_recruitment@umanitoba.ca. So if you have any questions and you need support, you need help, maybe reaching out to your community, you're not entirely sure how to do that, please email us. We would be more than happy to assist you. For Inuit students, we ask that, that you contact the designated organization or regional office in your province or territory of residence to determine your eligibility. Métis and non-status Indian students entering full-time studies, you may be eligible for financial support. Students are advised to contact the Manitoba Métis Federation Post-Secondary Education Support Program. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, you're not entirely sure how to do, or you just want some support and some help, by all means, again, please email us. We would be happy to help you. And lastly, the best, one of the ways to save or pay for your education, is wages and saving. So paying for your education with savings. I know some students have been saving through high school or maybe through the summer, or maybe in between your university, like each year, you take the summer off, you're not taking summer session courses and you decide to, save for next year's tuition there, put some money towards it. Part-time employment is also very unpopular on and off-campus opportunities. I definitely did that. I opted to work while I was in school. Some students prefer not to, some students prefer to, and that's okay. That goes back to you not comparing yourself to other students because your journey is going to be very different than other students. One thing that I do tell students is go to Career Services. They're a fantastic office that can be super helpful with resume writing, cover letter writing, preparing for interviews, that type of thing. They're fantastic. I really recommend connecting with them. They also have Career Connect. Career Connect is awesome for looking for on and off campus opportunities, internships, those types of things. And then we also have a work study program that Career Services offers. So work study is meant for folks that are on disability services or on band funding or government student loans like Manitoba Student Aid. If you are one of those students, you can apply through the work study program to gain employment through them that works around your class schedule. For international students, you can apply for work study as long as you have proof that in your home country you are on government aid, as long as you can have that proof. So you would need to connect directly with Career Services to ensure that you have that proof and that you can provide that. For international students as well, on your study permit, you can work up to 20 hours per week while on that study permit. So let's go over some tips for success. So you get what you put in. Results often reflect time and effort spent. And I know that it's overwhelming. I know that it can be time consuming, but I promise the more that you practice, the better that's going to be. You're going to have more practice filling out scholarship and bursary application. And it's just, you're going to start to get a rhythm. And it is worth your time. An hour of effort could result in $100 award. And, I always tell students, if you were to sit down for an hour, hour and a half, and you fill out 4 to 5 applications for a scholarship or bursary, and you end up getting, say, $1,000 from it. That's amazing. You just made $1,000 in an hour and a half. Like, that's incredible. One thing to really help you is to create a personal portfolio. I always tell students, keep everything organized. That's way you're not stressed, you know where everything is, and you can rely on that. So for example, if you have a USB or you have a special file on your computer, your laptop, or if you're old school like me, you keep things nice and organized in paper copies within a file. Keep your certificates, your accomplishments, achievements, resume, personal summary, keep it all organized. That way, when it comes time to applying for scholarships and bursaries, you have everything organized and you can pick and choose what you need. Typically, for applications, they usually require a resume, a personal summary, which is usually like an autobiography that talks about yourself, what inspires you, why you're going to school, that type of thing. And then 2 reference letters, sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's typically what's asked of you. And then do your research, know the details before starting your application. Please, please, please read the fine print. There's so many times where I have students that just skim over an application and don't actually sit down and read through things. It's really important to start training yourself to read emails, read things that are being put in front of you, read applications, because sometimes you can miss things and that can be very detrimental when it comes to applying for scholarships or bursary in case you missed a certain criteria or eligibility. But don't take yourself out of the running. Many awards go unallocated because no one applied. I don't know how many times I've heard students say, I'm not going to apply. I'm probably not going to get it. But how would you know unless you try, right? I know so many students that submitted an application for a scholarship or bursary that they thought they wouldn't get, and then they ended up getting it. And they're so happy about it. So you're never going to know unless you try. Plus, even if you don't get it, it's great practice. It's practice, writing that application, putting everything together, and just taking the time. And then lastly, know your finances, create a budget and stick to it. That's one of the most important things, not just for your university budget for your education, but it'll greatly be of value to you when it comes to your life and just budgeting for general things as you move forward with your life. So that's a number one thing that I can always tell students is know your finances and create that budget. So that's it for this series. So I really hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Our next presentation next week is for parents or loved ones, anyone that's helping to support you through this new journey. So supporting your students presentation is being run next week. We have our Indigenous student presentation running from May 31st to June 3rd. Really excited to host that presentation again. So if you are a self-identified First Nation, Métis, or Inuit student, and you would like to know more about the Indigenous community, how to get involved, supports and services, we would love to have you there. And if you're a non-Indigenous student and would like to know more about how to get involved in the community and how to make friends within the Indigenous community, we would love to have you, so please join us. And then every Friday, we've been hosting Q&As with current U of M students. These have been very popular. Our last one is actually being held next Friday on May the 28th. So I encourage you to register for that if you haven't already. You can register at umanitoba.ca/nextsteps. We also have our virtual campus tours. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we are unable to facilitate these tours in person. Please reach out to umanitoba.ca campus tours and register for a tour. This is a great way to see campus if you're a rural, a northern, or an international student and you've never been on campus. This is a fantastic way to see, what campus vibe is all about and to get your questions answered. And then lastly, we have our virtual advising center. This is actually pretty neat. So say, for example, you have some burning questions over the weekend and you forgot to ask, you can actually connect with a real person to get your questions answered. So umanitoba.ca/virtual advising help center. They're open 7 days a week. If you want to get connected with an advisor or if you have any specific questions or anything, reach out to them and they'd be happy to assist you. So that's it for the presentation. So what I want to do now is I want to encourage folks to utilize the Q&A. I'm going to be quickly looking at it in just a moment. If you have any specific questions, though, specific to your application or to your circumstances that you feel that maybe might not be beneficial for the entire crowd or the audience this evening, please email us instead. We would love to give you that one-on-one attention that you deserve. So email us at student_recruitment@umanitoba.ca or indigenous_recruitment@umanitoba.ca. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna open up the chat and